Lyra had learned, over the span of 112 orbital cycles, that invisibility was not a physical condition but a social agreement. No one announced it. No alarms rang. It simply settled over a person like recycled station air, thin, tasteless, quietly suffocating. Analyst Lyra of the Aerolith, the central console chimed, its voice tuned to diplomatic neutrality. Incoming transmission requires emotional stratification. Of course it does, she murmured, brushing her fingers across the interface. Heaven forbid a civilization simply say what it means. The transmission unfolded in layered frequencies, clicks, pulses, a faint harmonic tremor from a species that communicated through variations in magnetism. Lyra closed her eyes, her long ears angling slightly backward as she focused. To an outsider she might have appeared human, dark eyes, composed features, posture carefully balanced. But the elegant arcs of her ears marked her lineage unmistakably. They were longer than average, curving like slender crescents behind her hair. In Aerolith culture they were unremarkable. In her own estimation they were excessive. Conclusion, the console prompted. They are not threatening war, she replied calmly. They are threatening to withdraw from the banquet, which in their culture is significantly worse. A pause, clarify, they feel ignored. The console process this. Recommend countermeasure. Send an apology and double the luminescent algae arrangements. No species can resist bioluminescence. The console logged her suggestion without praise. It never praised. Machines, at least, were consistent. Outside the panoramic glass of the diplomatic ring, the Earth star burned in mineral blue silence. Ships drifted in orderly arcs, their hulls catching light like polished bone. Lyra watched them for a moment longer than necessary, then straightened as footsteps echoed behind her. Analyst Lyra. The voice was new, textured, grounded, carrying a faint roughness that suggested gravity stronger than the station's measured pull. She turned. The human stood at attention as if the corridor might suddenly demand inspection. His uniform bore the insignia of Earth's interstellar defense. Captain Adrian Vale, if her briefing memory served correctly. Dark hair, disciplined posture, eyes that seemed perpetually on the verge of calculating trajectories. Yes, she said, you are the human liaison. He blinked once. I prefer Captain, but yes, that's me. Very well, Captain, yes me. A flicker crossed his expression before he exhaled a short laugh. I see the translation files warned me about Aerolith literalism, and they warned me about human ego. Did they now? They included a footnote. He folded his hands behind his back, studying her with open curiosity rather than guarded diplomacy. It unsettled her more than hostility would have. I've been assigned to assist you with joint communication protocols, he said. Apparently our sarcasm is destabilizing 3 minor alliances. Yes, Lyra replied evenly. Your species weaponizes irony without a permit. He coughed, almost choking on his own breath. We're working on that. A service drone drifted between them, scanning Adrian's boots. A red beam flickered across the polished surface. Contamination risk detected, the drone announced. Human footwear exhibits 73 unidentified microbial signatures. Adrian looked down. They're mostly friendly. Define friendly, the drone demanded. They don't bite me. Lyra pressed her lips together as the drone released a mist of sterilizing vapor around his legs. Adrian stood there, resigned, enveloped in a faint cloud. This is not how I imagined first contact would feel, he muttered. You are fortunate, Lyra replied. The last delegate was dipped entirely. When the drone finally drifted away, Adrian cleared his throat. Right, so, I've reviewed your previous analyses, you're thorough. I have been told that word before. It's a compliment. She tilted her head slightly. It is also often a prelude to, but, he hesitated, then smiled. No, but, just thorough. Silence settled between them, not hostile but uncertain. Lyra gestured toward the console. We are currently preventing a banquet-based diplomatic collapse. Ah, my specialty. You specialize in banquets. I specialize in preventing collapses, banquet or otherwise. She studied him for several seconds, cataloging micro-expressions, breathing rhythms, sincerity markers. Humans were expressive. Their faces betrayed internal weather patterns with remarkable transparency. It was inefficient but strangely compelling. "You may observe," she allowed. He stepped beside her, close enough that she could sense the subtle warmth radiating from him. Human physiology ran slightly hotter than aerolith norms. She adjusted her stance by a fractional degree. As she translated the magnetic pulses into tonal approximations, Adrian watched not the screen but her. The awareness prickled along her skin. "Is something malfunctioning?" she asked without looking at him. "No," he said softly, "I was just thinking." That is rarely reassuring. He huffed another quiet laugh. "Back home, people would pay to have ears like yours." Her hands stilled above the console. "I'm sorry," she said. "Your ears," he repeated, as if stating an obvious tactical assessment. "They're elegant, like star wings caught mid-fold." The station hummed. The Earth star flared faintly beyond the glass. Lyra's mind, accustomed to parsing complex emotional spectra, encountered a sudden blank field. "Star wings," she echoed. "Yeah." He shrugged slightly. "I mean it, they're extraordinary." There was no smirk, no teasing cadence. No social maneuvering detectable in his pulse. Just simple observation. She turned fully toward him, searching for subtext. In aerolith society, ear length correlates only with auditory range. It is not considered aesthetically significant. Maybe it should be. That would be statistically inefficient. Beauty usually is. The concept hung between them, luminous and inconvenient. Lyra forced her fingers back to the interface. "The magnetized species accepts the algae compromise," she said mechanically. "The banquet will proceed. See," Adrian said lightly. "Crisis averted, you're basically a hero. I am an analyst. Same difference." "No," she replied. "Heroes are admired." He looked at her as if the statement puzzled him. "You don't think you are?" She met his gaze evenly. "Admiration implies distinction. And you don't think you're distinct?" The question was absurd. The station housed beings of living crystal and sentient gas clouds. She was nearly human in form, functional in role, unremarkable in lineage. "I am adequate," she said at last. Adrian studied her for a long moment, the humor in his expression softening into something steadier. "Adequate doesn't stabilize interstellar diplomacy," he said. "You do." Her pulse ticked once, slightly off rhythm. A distant alarm chimed, minor gravitational fluctuation in the outer ring. Routine, contained. The station would correct it within seconds. Lyra glanced toward the ceiling, then back at him. "You humans," she said carefully, "are known for impulsive verbalizations." "Guilty." "Was your earlier statement impulsive?" He considered that, brow furrowing. "No." The gravity stabilizers hummed back into equilibrium. Outside, a transport ship ignited its drives, scattering brief shards of blue light across the glass. Lyra felt something shift, not externally, but within the quiet architecture of her thoughts. A recalibration so slight it might have gone unnoticed, had she not been trained to detect the faintest tremors in alien emotion. "Very well, Captain," she said, returning her attention to the console. "We have prevented social catastrophe. Your presence was non-disruptive." He grinned. "High praise. Do not become accustomed to it." He leaned lightly against the console, careful not to trigger another sterilization protocol. Too late. She allowed herself, just for a fraction of a second, the smallest curve of a smile. Invisible, she had once believed, was a permanent state. Yet as the Earth star burned steadily beyond the glass and the human beside her continued to look at her as though she occupied the center of the frame, Lyra found the concept destabilizing. For the first time, invisibility felt less like fact and more like hypothesis. And hypotheses, she knew very well, were meant to be tested. The next cycle began with a tremor so slight most delegates assumed it was philosophical disagreement. Lyra did not. She felt it through the floor panels first, a delicate shiver in the artificial gravity lattice beneath her boots. Her long ears angled backward instinctively, catching the faint harmonic distortion threading through the station's core systems. Central, she said quietly, fingers already moving across the interface, report gravitational variance in Ring 3. Variance within acceptable parameters, the station replied. Define acceptable. Below catastrophic. She exhaled slowly. That is not reassuring. Across the console, Captain Adrian Vale leaned over a holographic projection of the station's structural grid. You always start your mornings with almost catastrophic news. It is statistically efficient, she replied. If catastrophe occurs, I am emotionally prepared. I prefer coffee. You consume a liquid stimulant before analyzing potential disaster. Yes, it makes the disaster seem polite. She glanced at him. Your species is very strange. We've been told. Another tremor rippled outward, stronger this time. The holographic grid flickered. A thin red thread pulsed along the outer stabilizers. Adrian straightened. That doesn't look polite. No, Lyra agreed. It looks intentional. She expanded the projection, isolating the disturbance. A cluster of unauthorized signals threaded through the gravitational drive network, fragmented code, layered and recursive. Someone is tickling the stabilizers, Adrian muttered. Tickling is an inaccurate term. Fine, aggressively tickling. Lyra resisted the urge to comment on human terminology and instead began parsing the signal. The code bore markers of a rogue mining consortium operating beyond the Accord's jurisdiction. They had recently been denied access to the Urith asteroid belt. Retaliation, she said. For what? For being told no. Adrian winced. Yeah, humans don't love that word either. The lights dimmed briefly as another fluctuation passed through the ring. In the distance, faint alarms began to chime, soft at first, then multiplying in uneasy harmony. Lyra opened a channel to Central Command. We are experiencing coordinated interference with the gravity lattice. Recommend lockdown of external access nodes. Request denied, Central Command replied. Negotiations with the mining consortium are ongoing. Adrian blinked. They're negotiating while someone's pulling on the station's spine. Yes, Lyra said. Diplomacy is frequently ill-timed. He ran a hand through his hair. Permission to be blunt. You are human, it is redundant to ask. We should shut them out before this turns into a floating pancake situation. A floating, never mind. Another tremor struck harder. The floor tilted half a degree before correcting. A cluster of delegates down the corridor gasped in 3 different languages. Lyra focused. The rogue code wasn't brute force. It was harmonic, feeding subtle oscillations into the stabilizers, pushing them toward resonance failure. They are attempting to create a cascading feedback loop, she said. Adrian leaned closer to the projection. Can we counter it? Yes, she replied, if we outsing them. He stared at her. Outsing. The lattice responds to frequency modulation. If I introduce a counterharmonic pattern, we can neutralize the oscillation. Of course you can, he said, as if this were the most normal sentence in the galaxy. She began constructing the counter-signal, weaving fragments of aerolith harmonic mathematics with human encryption protocols. The interface flared brighter as she layered waveforms atop one another. Adrian monitored external channels. Mining ships are repositioning, he reported. They're pretending this is accidental. Pretending requires energy, Lyra replied. Energy leaves traces. The tremors intensified. A distant crash echoed through the ring as unsecured objects succumbed briefly to shifting gravity. Adrian steadied himself against the console. You good? Yes. You don't look. I am concentrating. He raised his hands. Right, no more commentary. For several seconds, only the hum of processors filled the space. Lyra adjusted amplitude ratios, her long ears subtly tracking the harmonic shifts in the room. She could almost hear the lattices strain, a low, wounded resonance. "Captain," she said without looking at him, "when you complimented my ears, was that a tactical maneuver?" He blinked. "What? No. Humans sometimes deploy flattery strategically. I'm not that advanced." Despite the tension, a faint curve touched her mouth. "Good." The stabilizers lurched violently. The artificial horizon beyond the glass skewed, stars sliding at impossible angles. An alarm escalated to urgent. "Lyra," Adrian said sharply, "we're losing alignment." "I am aware." She injected the first layer of counterharmonic code. The lattice responded with a discordant shudder. "Not enough." "They're adapting," she murmured. "Can you adapt faster?" "Yes." "How?" She glanced at him briefly. "By not doubting myself." The words surprised her as much as they did him. She deepened the harmonic pattern, letting instinct guide the modulation rather than rigid protocol. Her fingers moved with fluid certainty, weaving soundless music through the station's spine. Adrian watched her with open focus, no trace of skepticism. "You've got this," he said quietly. The simple confidence in his voice cut through the noise like a stabilizing beam. Lyra amplified the signal. For one suspended second, the station seemed to inhale. Then the tremors softened. The red threads on the projection dimmed, flickering as the rogue oscillations lost coherence. The lattice hummed back toward equilibrium, its wounded resonance easing into steady vibration. Adrian let out a breath he'd clearly been holding. "Please tell me that's the good kind of silence." "It is," she replied, scanning the readouts. "The feedback loop has collapsed." A final ripple passed through the ring, gentler this time, like a ship settling after turbulence. Central Command's voice returned, suddenly strained. "Interference neutralized. Mining consortium vessels retreating." "Of course they are," Adrian muttered. "Nothing to see here, just a failed attempt at structural sabotage." Lyra deactivated the countersignal slowly, ensuring stability before releasing control. Only then did she become aware of the residual tremor in her own pulse. "You recalibrated an entire gravity lattice in under 4 minutes," Adrian said, staring at the fading projection. "Back home, that would earn you a parade." "A parade is inefficient," she replied automatically. "I'd attend anyway." She turned to face him fully. The corridor lights had returned to normal. Delegates were already resuming their composed postures, pretending the universe had not briefly tilted. "You were not afraid," she observed. "Oh, I was absolutely afraid," he said. "I just try not to advertise it." "Why?" "Because sometimes someone else needs to believe you're steady." The statement lingered between them. Lyra considered the harmonic pattern she had woven, how easily it had formed once she stopped questioning her own precision. How his unguarded certainty had anchored her in the moment when doubt might have fractured her focus. "You trust me," she said softly. He frowned slightly. "Shouldn't I?" "You barely know me." He shrugged. "I know what I've seen." "And what have you seen?" "A woman who can hear a space station breathe," he said, "and who refuses to admit she's extraordinary." Her ears warmed, a physiological response she had always found inconvenient. "Extraordinary implies deviation from norm," she said. "Exactly." A faint laugh escaped her before she could suppress it. It startled them both. "There," Adrian said, pointing gently. "That sound, worth destabilizing gravity for. Do not encourage further sabotage." "Noted." Outside the glass, the Urith star continued its silent burn, indifferent to the minor drama of sentient beings. Lyra straightened her posture, reviewing the stabilized systems one final time. Everything held. The lattice sang in quiet balance. For cycles, she had believed herself adequate, functional, precise, replaceable. Yet when the station's spine had been threatened, it was her hands that steadied it, her instincts that found harmony in chaos. And he had not doubted her once. "Captain," she said carefully, "if another almost catastrophic event occurs, will you require coffee first?" He grinned. "Probably." "Very well," she replied. "I will factor that into emergency response timing." He laughed openly this time, the sound bright against the hum of restored equilibrium. As the alarms faded and the diplomatic ring resumed its polished composure, Lyra felt a subtle shift within herself, less dramatic than the lattice's tremor, yet more profound. In the quiet aftermath, invisibility seemed less convincing, not because the station had nearly fallen, but because someone had watched her hold it together and never once looked away. The council chamber had been rearranged for renewed unity, which meant the chairs were now positioned in a circle instead of a hierarchy. Lyra suspected this was meant to symbolize equality. It mostly symbolized the increased likelihood of accidental eye contact. She stood at her assigned node, data slate steady in her hands. Her long ears were adorned with a thin arc of silver filaments, ceremonial, conductive, unnecessary. She had chosen them anyway. Across the chamber, Captain Adrian Vale pretended not to watch her. The presiding envoy inclined their crystalline head. Analyst Lyra of the Aerolith, you requested primary address. I did, she replied, her voice carrying evenly through the acoustic field. Recent instability has revealed a structural truth. A low murmur rippled among delegates, some luminous, some scaled, one faintly gaseous and perpetually drifting 2 centimeters above its seat. The mining consortium's interference demonstrated a vulnerability, she continued, not in our gravity lattice, but in our approach to cooperation. Adrian folded his hands behind his back, expression carefully neutral. He had argued with her for 3 hours the previous cycle about whether this speech was reckless. You're about to propose something bold, he had said. Yes, that usually translates to dangerous, only to species uncomfortable with progress. I'm human, he had replied. We invented progress and then immediately worried about it. Now, in the chamber, Lyra met the gaze of each delegate in turn. We respond to threats with defense, she said. With reinforced systems, with tighter restrictions, this ensures survival, it does not ensure trust. A crystalline envoy flickered. Trust is inefficient. So is war, Lyra replied calmly. Silence settled, heavier than gravity fluctuations. I propose the formation of joint exploration vessels, she said. Crews composed equally of aerolith and humans, shared command, shared research, shared risk. The gaseous delegate pulsed uncertainly. You would disperse sensitive knowledge beyond your species. Yes, a scaled ambassador hissed softly. Humans are impulsive. Adrian raised a hand. In our defense, we are impulsive in very creative ways. A few delegates emitted what might have been laughter. Lyra continued, unwavering. Impulsivity is not inherently destructive. It is directionless energy. With guidance, it becomes innovation. She felt Adrian's attention sharpen at that. The consortium acted because they felt excluded, she said. If we build walls higher, others will only attempt to climb them. If we build bridges, she paused, at least they must learn to walk beside us. The presiding envoy refracted light thoughtfully, and who would command such a vessel? Lyra's pulse steadied. I volunteer. A flicker of surprise crossed several faces. Even Adrian's composure cracked for a fraction of a second. You hold a secure analytical position, the crystalline envoy noted. Why risk it? Because adequacy is no longer sufficient, she replied. The words hung in the chamber, clear and unembellished. The scaled ambassador tilted its head. Explain. Lyra drew a slow breath. For cycles, I have believed my role was to interpret the voices of others, to ensure they were heard. I now understand that being heard myself is not arrogance, it is responsibility. Adrian's gaze did not waver. The presiding envoy turned slightly toward him. And the human military, would they entrust personnel to such a venture? Adrian stepped forward before Central Command could transmit a cautious response. Yes. A subtle murmur passed through the chamber. You speak without consulting your superiors, the envoy observed. Yes, Adrian said evenly. They can reprimand me later. I recommend they make it brief. Lyra's composure nearly fractured into a smile. Our recent incident, Adrian continued, proved that isolation makes us predictable. Working together made us resilient. I've seen analyst Lyra stabilize a gravity lattice under hostile interference. If she believes joint exploration strengthens us, I trust her assessment. The chamber fell into contemplative quiet. Minutes stretched. Data projections flickered between delegates in silent debate. Finally, the presiding envoy inclined their head. Proposal accepted. A pilot vessel will be commissioned. Shared command structure. Equal representation. A release of tension moved through the room like a gentle shift in orbit. Lyra felt it, not triumph, but alignment. After the session dissolved into logistics and restrained congratulations, Adrian found her near the observation dome. The Earth star burned steadily beyond the transparent barrier. "You didn't warn me you were volunteering," he said. "You would have attempted to dissuade me." "Correct." She folded her hands behind her back. "Did I miscalculate?" He studied her for a long moment. "No, I'm just adjusting." "To what?" "To the fact that you no longer need reassurance before you do something extraordinary." She turned slightly toward him. "I never required reassurance." He raised an eyebrow. "Very well," she amended. "I required less than I believed." He leaned against the railing, careful this time not to trigger any sterilization drones. "You realize exploration vessels aren't quiet academic environments. There will be unknown systems, unmapped phenomena, possibly things with more teeth than diplomacy." "I am aware," she replied. "Are you afraid?" "Constantly." "Will you advertise it?" "Probably not." A soft silence settled between them, comfortable now rather than uncertain. "Earth High Command transmitted reassignment orders this morning," he said at last. Her pulse shifted, though she kept her voice steady. "You will return home." That